interestingly, Iran is the only country which has reserved seats in the parliament for the Christians, for the Jews, and for the Zoroastrians. Now, we have to remember that, I don't know the exact number, maybe you can help me with this, what the exact number, the ratio between population and a representative is. You know, how much population you have to have for one representative in the Majlis. I can't remember that right now. I'm looking it up, but I can't find it.
I don't remember either. Sorry. Maybe right. I can search.
Right. So the reason I'm mentioning that is that so everybody else who's a member of the parliament, there's a certain ratio of population which one representative represents. So every 10 years there's a census in Iran. We establish the population, and then based on that 10-year census, we determine how many representatives are in the parliament. If you divide that minimum amount of citizens having one representative, which I can't remember the numbers right now. Now, when this system happened, they said, well, you know, the Jews and the Christians and the Zoroastrians are less than that minimum amount for each representative in the parliament. So their total number, each one, doesn't add up to the minimum amount that is required to have as one representative. And so what we have is we have reserved seats for the Christians. We have 2 seats for the Christians. There are the Christians in the north and the south. We have 1 Jewish and 1 Zoroastrian. I think, I'm not quite sure, but I think that's the way it is. So basically what you have is you have, no matter what the number of the religious minorities are, even if it's less than the minimum amount that's required for one representative, they are guaranteed a seat in the parliament. And they vote on all the laws, and they come and speak about everything, and they are part of all the committees and the various committees that exist that make the decisions. Were you able to find the numbers?
Yes, it is 1 representative for every 150,000 people.
Right, which is more than the total sum of the minorities. So we'll have, I don't know, maybe we can actually figure it out now so that the people listening can actually, we can give them some numbers. We can say that the total amount of, let's say, Jews or Christians in Iran is less than that, and yet they have a reserved seat in the parliament, with all the rights that a parliament member has in terms of, participating fully in the parliamentary process.
We are open to questions again for the participants on the panel, the attendees. Unfortunately, Sheikh Mohammed Mehdi Taib is facing some technical problems because he joined us on the panel, but he is out now, and we are talking on the WhatsApp together. But and then there are some technical problems with his connection, I guess. So I do apologize for not having him so far.
For example,
there is some question about who is responsible for holding the elections.
Sure. Okay, the person the organization that runs the election is the Interior Ministry, but it is supervised by the Guardian Council.
So does it possibly pave the ground for the government to make it a fraudulent elections? So because the government has the power, just to clarify
everything.
Guardian
Council is supervising, and they have to make sure that there's no fraud, and they've done a good job for 42 years. Is it possible that some people are, going to be corrupt and do things? Yes, it's possible. But has it happened? Do we have evidence of that? No, we don't have evidence of that. Even in the 1388 elections, they claimed fraud. It took months for this thing to be, investigated. There were different groups coming and going, even from the people who were protesting, and no evidence was shown that there's election fraud. there might be some problems, technical problems that happen in the tens of thousands of different election stations that exist in the country, but there's no fraud, there's no systematic fraud, or there's no sort of a some sort of a conspiracy to not let it happen. Just as it could happen in other countries, as we saw, for example, in the last elections in the U.S., as claimed by 70% of the Republicans who claimed that this election was illegitimate in the U.S. Who knows, right?
Again, we lost him. He was here right now, but again, we lost him.
Okay,
there is some question which actually reminded me of my young ages when I was a teenager. I'm at my 40s now, and I remember about when I was a teenager, I was interested in politics. I was following the news and everything. And the first election, I remember I was 12 years old. At those times when I was a teenager, I was following the news. I was hearing that that we have elections almost every 2 years. We had some elections, and or maybe we can say an election every year, and on average, we have had so far, or even more. And when I see the way the elections are held, I remember I was part of the elections. Holding the elections. I was at the ballot box when I was 16, 17 or something like that. I was participating in the election, and everything was in a way that you cannot actually make any fraud, or the way it sounded logical to me. But on the other side, I was following the news and the Western media, the claims that for example, Americans or the Europeans were making against Iran, and they do it right now even, that they don't consider Iran a democracy. It didn't sum up to my mind that how it is considered that a country is a democracy and the other one is not a democracy. One, the democracy basically means that people have a say through the voting system. And in Iran, we have had this election. You talked about to some extent, talked about the way the elections are held in Iran. That was the paradox in my mind when I was a teenager. Of course, I have studied politics and I know much more than that time now. But I want to ask it from you, that how a country is a democracy and the other one is not. And from that, I want to go to this, that is Iran a democracy or not? When we say democracy, what do we mean by that?
Sure. Well, let me first say that if Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, himself personally came down and told the Americans that Iran is a democracy, they wouldn't believe it. So who cares, right? I mean, they're going to say whatever they're going to say. Same with some of the Europeans. Same with, we don't even have to go and talk about some of the regional countries. They should not even open their mouths about it. So the point is that I think that we need to get beyond this constantly trying to defend ourselves. And this is a problem that I have with a lot of the elites in Iran, is that they play in the field that is determined by the enemy. And you shouldn't do that, because you're going to lose. When the enemy determines the rules of the game, you're always, whoever you're fighting against or whoever you're playing against, if they are determining the rules, you're obviously going to be at a disadvantage. So I think we have to stop caring about what the Westerners say in terms of whether we are or not a democracy, and it's none of their business. Okay, so we're not a democracy. What's it to you? Or we are a democracy. What's it to you? If we look at it from an Iranian-centric perspective, I'm talking about Iranian-centric in the sense of understanding where we are as a nation and where we were, and the processes that I explained, the history that I explained, the strategic, situation that we're in terms of being the only real republic that democratic and republic in the region. I would even say Turkey isn't that much of a democracy anymore. Maybe better than a lot of the other countries, but even I would say that there's a lot of issues with Turkey even. So there's only really two countries in the region that can even claim anything close to a democracy, which is Iran and Turkey, and everybody else, better not open their mouth. That includes Israel, because Israel is not a democracy. Israel is an apartheid state which privileges certain Jews over the non-Jewish citizens, or even certain Jews over other Jews in that state. So, it's maybe close to apartheid South Africa in terms of its democracy. It's democracy for a minority, if you calculate the entire population of Israel, of Palestine, 1948 Palestine, West Bank, and Gaza. So the point is that we are a democracy, the democracy that we determine in terms of the way we define it. Our democracy is a religious democracy. Ayatollah Khamenei has spoken about this for years and has talked about it many times. The fact that you have Western elites, whether they're politicians or academics or media people, not, looking at or listening to or trying to understand what Ayatollah Khamenei has been talking about it, that should give you a clue as to whether we should care about what they're saying or not. If you have somebody who's been talking about this for 30 years and explaining it theoretically and explaining it how this is democracy in Iran, given our history, given our culture, given our religion, given our beliefs, given our values, and how this constitutes a democracy and maybe much more of a democracy for many other places. By the way, let's be very clear. The West is not a democracy. America is not a democracy. America is an oligarchy. It's run by, the oligarchs, the billionaires, those who completely control the political process, those who completely control the party system, those who completely control the media, those who completely control technology and the economic sphere, those who completely control culture and sports and whatever there is in America. If you look at something and you trace the money trail, it goes back to some billionaire or some billionaire's foundation. So, we don't even need to talk about America being a democracy. It's a complete oligarchy. It's very clear. Anybody who comes and threatens it, somebody like Bernie Sanders, who might even be very lightly, and I don't even consider Sanders very socialist or democratic or anything. He's just a very, on the edges, trying to, rhetorically challenge some of the oligarchy. They completely put him aside. So we don't even need to talk about America being a democracy. We don't need to talk about Britain being a democracy. We might be able to argue that in some smaller European country, but then you have to also look again. Is the economy of that smaller European country not dependent on American imperialism and on the money of the billionaires coming in and supporting it? What country in Europe do we have that actually has a populist movement and a government that actually cares for working people and cares for people who are at the bottom end of the social ladder? Do we ever see the unemployment statistics for people under 30 being published in Europe? I haven't seen it for years because they don't want to publish it. Do we ever talk about the poverty line? How do we define unemployment? If you define unemployment as in the U.S. by the U.S. Department of Labor, unemployment in the U.S. is somebody who's employed is somebody who works 2 hours a week. That's an employed person in the U.S. Somebody who hasn't worked in 5 years is not even counted in the statistics. They take you out of the statistics if you've been unemployed for 5 years. You don't even count. You're not even a human anymore. So we need to be very clear about who's making certain statements instead of trying to immediately go into defense mode and be like, oh, no, but we are a democracy. We have to say, okay, who are you, first of all, to be asking this question? What is democracy? For us in Iran, this is democracy. It's a republic. We have an executive branch which is elected and which makes a difference when there's elections. It is very different to have the Rouhani administration than to have the Ahmadinejad administration than to have the Khatami administration. There is actually a huge difference. Those on the outside might not understand it, but there's a big difference. So elections in Iran matter, especially for the presidency. It's very different, the current parliament that we have than the previous parliament that we had, than the previous parliament that we had, than the sixth parliament that we had, than the first parliament that we had. So as far as we're concerned, this is a democracy, but within the framework of our religion, which is Islam, and under the guidance and under the leadership of the jurisprudent. which, it's not even about the person. Yes,